Most people think of sleep as a continuous river of rest, a gentle flow that carries the body through its nightly repair cycles. Yet within that calm stream, there can be hidden pauses, brief, invisible moments when breathing silently stops. These interruptions, known as sleep apnea, may last only a few seconds, but their impact can echo through every organ, every cell, and every morning that follows. Modern neuroscience now reveals that these pauses are not harmless. They create repeated waves of oxygen shortage that shake the stability of the heart, disturb brain chemistry, and alter hormonal balance. Studies using advanced imaging show how even mild apnea can reduce gray matter volume in regions responsible for memory and emotional control. It is a disorder that connects the smallest capillaries to the largest arteries, showing how something as simple as a breath can influence the complexity of human health. Tonight, you'll learn why millions live unaware of these nightly disturbances, how science detects them, and what new discoveries explain their deep link with the metabolism, immune system, and mental state. Before we begin, I invite you to close your eyes, let your breathing slow down, and allow my voice to guide you on a peaceful journey through the world of sleep apnea. Get ready to discover some of the most curious, surprising, and fascinating facts about this condition, all told in a calm, steady way, perfect for relaxing, learning, and drifting away. Let's start with what happens in a single breath. Each inhalation pulls oxygen through the nose or mouth, down the throat, past a soft tunnel called the pharynx, and into the lungs. In sleep apnea, that tunnel collapses temporarily. The airflow stops, oxygen levels fall, and within seconds the brain senses danger. It briefly wakes the body just enough to reopen the airway. The person might not fully awaken, yet their heart rate spikes, their blood pressure surges, and deep sleep fragments. This can occur hundreds of times per night without memory of it in the morning. The result is a brain that thinks it slept 8 hours, but experienced hundreds of tiny emergencies instead. Modern research divides apnea into two main types, obstructive and central. In obstructive sleep apnea, muscles of the throat relax too much, closing the airway despite efforts to breathe. In central sleep apnea, the brain itself fails to send proper signals to the breathing muscles. A third pattern, complex sleep apnea, blends both. Imaging studies using fMRI and near-infrared spectroscopy have shown that during apneic events, oxygen saturation in the brain can drop sharply, causing microinjuries to neural tissues if repeated over months or years. These findings explain why chronic apnea correlates strongly with memory decline, slower reaction times, and morning headaches. As you listen, imagine your body as a finely tuned system designed for rhythm. Heartbeat, breathing, temperature, and circadian timing all work together like synchronized instruments. Sleep apnea disrupts that rhythm. Every time breathing stops, the sympathetic nervous system activates, as if facing a threat. Adrenaline is released repeatedly throughout the night, raising inflammation and interfering with insulin sensitivity. This is why untreated apnea is linked not only to fatigue, but to hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and weight gain. In fact, scientists now view apnea as both a cause and a consequence of metabolic syndrome. Excess weight narrows the airway. Apnea worsens sleep. Poor sleep alters hormones that control appetite, and appetite drives more weight gain, a biological loop that can be broken only by restoring stable breathing at night. When breathing stops, carbon dioxide rises, the blood becomes slightly more acidic, and the brainstem, which monitors these chemical shifts, sounds an alarm. This constant alarm during the night trains the body to stay half awake, never fully entering the deeper restorative stages of sleep. Polysomnography, the detailed overnight recording of brainwaves, heart activity, airflow, and oxygen, shows that people with moderate sleep apnea can spend less than 10% of the night in slow-wave sleep. That's the stage when growth hormone is released and tissue repair accelerates. Without it, healing slows and muscles ache longer after exercise or injury. Cardiologists describe sleep apnea as an unseen partner of heart disease. Every apnea episode acts like a brief blood pressure stress test. Repeated hundreds of times per night, it pushes the heart through cycles of strain and recovery. Over months, this raises the baseline blood pressure even during the day. Studies from Harvard and the European Heart Journal report that untreated apnea doubles the risk of atrial fibrillation, triples the risk of resistant hypertension, and increases the chance of stroke by nearly 60%. The reason lies in oxygen instability. Each drop and rebound triggers oxidative stress, tiny bursts of free radicals that inflame vessel walls and thicken arterial linings. The brain, meanwhile, suffers from microfragmentation of its sleep architecture. Electroencephalography reveals that every apnea event jolts the cortex just enough to reset the clock of deep sleep, preventing the long, continuous cycles necessary for memory consolidation. In tests of word recall and reaction time, untreated patients often perform as if they had been awake for 24 hours, yet they might insist they slept fine. The mismatch between perception and physiology makes apnea particularly deceptive. Hormonal disruption adds another layer. When oxygen drops, the body produces excess cortisol, the stress hormone. At the same time, leptin, which signals fullness, decreases, and ghrelin, which drives hunger, rises. The result is increased appetite, especially for carbohydrates, creating a self-reinforcing link between poor sleep, stress, and weight gain. Researchers now view sleep apnea as a metabolic amplifier. It magnifies any existing vulnerability, whether to obesity, insulin resistance, or mood imbalance. Modern devices have transformed how we detect it. Portable monitors track breathing through sensors placed on the nose, chest, and finger, while smartwatches estimate apnea risk using motion and oxygen patterns. Artificial intelligence models trained on thousands of sleep studies can predict with 90% accuracy who might have undiagnosed apnea simply from overnight heart rate variability. This technology allows earlier intervention, often before symptoms become severe, but awareness remains low. Many people blame fatigue on stress or long work hours, never realizing that dozens of micro-awakenings each hour prevent the brain from completing its nightly maintenance. The hippocampus, which organizes memory, shows measurable shrinkage in chronic apnea patients. Fortunately, these changes can reverse after several months of effective treatment, proving the brain's ability to heal once oxygen and deep sleep are restored. Treatment begins with diagnosis, but management varies. Continuous positive airway pressure, known as CPAP, remains the gold standard. It gently delivers air through a mask, preventing airway collapse. Despite its simplicity, adherence can be challenging because of discomfort or noise. To improve comfort, newer models automatically adjust pressure, use quieter turbines, and pair with humidifiers to reduce dryness. Alternatives include mandibular advancement devices that reposition the jaw slightly forward, surgical reshaping of the soft palate, and in select cases, hypoglossal nerve stimulators that activate the tongue muscle during inspiration. Each approach targets the same goal: uninterrupted airflow. Scientists also emphasize lifestyle correction. Weight loss as small as 10% can cut apnea severity in half. Avoiding sedatives, alcohol, and late-night heavy meals prevents additional muscle relaxation of the throat. Training the body to sleep on the side rather than on the back reduces collapse episodes. Even simple nasal breathing exercises improve airflow stability. These adjustments complement medical therapy and, in many cases, reduce dependence on devices. For children, the story differs. Pediatric sleep apnea often arises from enlarged tonsils or adenoids rather than obesity. Symptoms may appear as hyperactivity rather than fatigue, leading to misdiagnosis as attention deficit disorder. Removing the obstructing tissue usually resolves the issue completely, highlighting how structural causes change across age. In adults, weight and muscle tone dominate. In children, anatomy and inflammation do. Every discovery about apnea reshapes how we think of sleep itself, not merely as rest, but as a vital biological state that depends on precise breathing coordination. When that rhythm breaks, the consequences ripple across the cardiovascular, metabolic, and cognitive systems. Restoring it is more than preventing snoring. It is reestablishing equilibrium across the body. Take another slow breath in and out. As you listen, notice how breathing feels when it's effortless. This is what science aims to protect each night, the quiet continuity of air and life. Chronic sleep apnea is not only a mechanical breathing problem, it is also an inflammatory disorder. Each apnea event triggers microbursts of oxidative stress as oxygen falls and rises repeatedly. Those fluctuations cause the immune system to enter a state of constant low-grade activation. Laboratory studies show elevated levels of C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha in untreated patients, markers that signal inflammation throughout the body. This explains why apnea is strongly linked with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and even certain cancers. The immune system, designed for short emergencies, becomes fatigued when alarmed every few minutes through the night. During normal sleep, immune cells reorganize and produce antibodies. Deep sleep supports the migration of T cells, which recognize and destroy infected or damaged cells. When apnea fragments at rest, these nightly immune calibrations fail. Researchers at Stanford observed that after only 1 week of simulated apnea exposure, healthy volunteers showed impaired vaccine responses. That means the body learned less effectively from immune challenges simply because breathing was unstable. Inside the brain, chemistry shifts in subtle but measurable ways. Oxygen deprivation alters neurotransmitter balance, increasing glutamate and decreasing gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA. Glutamate excites neurons. GABA calms them. The imbalance leaves the brain more irritable and less able to relax. Functional MRI scans show hyperactivity in the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, and reduced regulation by the prefrontal cortex, which normally dampens excessive reactions. This pattern mirrors what is seen in chronic anxiety and depression. In fact, several psychiatric clinics now routinely screen for sleep apnea in patients who show persistent mood instability despite medication. When the apnea is treated, mood often stabilizes without dosage changes, confirming that oxygen rhythm plays a hidden role in emotional balance. Cognitive effects follow a similar logic. The hippocampus, essential for memory, is sensitive to oxygen supply. Repeated desaturation disrupts neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, and interferes with the consolidation of memories formed during the day. In one study, Adults with untreated apnea performed 20% worse on spatial memory tests, but recovered after 3 months of consistent CPAP use. This shows how quickly the brain can rebuild connections once deep sleep returns. There is also evidence that apnea accelerates brain aging. Diffusion tensor imaging, which maps white matter pathways, reveals reduced connectivity between regions responsible for attention, decision-making, and coordination. The good news is that this deterioration is largely reversible when oxygen flow stabilizes. Neuroscientists describe it as functional pruning rather than permanent loss. The brain simply reduces activity in pathways it cannot sustain during oxygen instability, then reactivates them when conditions improve. Metabolic hormones respond as well. Fragmented sleep increases insulin resistance, meaning cells respond less effectively to glucose. In the morning, blood sugar runs higher even if no food has been consumed. This relationship helps explain why treating apnea improves diabetes control. Endocrinologists sometimes find that a patient's fasting glucose normalizes after months of nightly CPAP use without changes in diet. At a population level, the consequences are substantial. Epidemiological data suggests that about 20% of adults experience at least mild apnea, but over 80% remain undiagnosed. Among men over 40, prevalence can reach 1 in 3. Women's risk increases sharply after menopause due to hormonal changes that alter airway muscle tone. Recognizing these patterns has led to new screening tools. Questionnaires combined with oxygen monitoring wearables that identify those most likely to benefit from full evaluation. The human body adapts to apnea in curious ways. Some patients develop a blunted perception of sleepiness. The brain normalizes fatigue. Others wake up suddenly with gasps and palpitations because carbon dioxide sensors remain highly sensitive. Genetic factors may explain this variability. Studies in identical twins show heritability estimates around 40%, pointing to inherited differences in airway anatomy, fat distribution, and ventilatory control. Understanding these factors could lead to personalized treatments that target the specific biological weaknesses causing each person's apnea. Even the gut microbiome plays a role. Animal experiments have shown that intermittent hypoxia reshapes bacterial communities in the intestines, increasing species that promote inflammation and reducing those that produce protective short-chain fatty acids. When oxygen levels are stabilized again, the microbial balance slowly returns to normal. This suggests that apnea extends its influence beyond the lungs and brain, affecting digestion, metabolism, and immune health through microbial communication channels. In practical terms, recognizing and treating apnea improves quality of life quickly. Within days, patients often report reduced morning headaches, steadier mood, and clearer concentration. After weeks, blood pressure drops and heart rate variability, a measure of cardiovascular resilience, improves. These measurable gains remind us that restoring simple breathing stability can rebalance complex systems. Take a slow breath again. Feel how air moves easily through your nose and chest. That ease represents balance. Science's goal is to maintain that effortless rhythm throughout every night, so the body can repair and the mind can recover without interruption. The heart is one of the first organs to feel the strain of disrupted breathing. Each time airflow stops, the chest still tries to draw in air. This creates negative pressure that stretches the heart's thin walls and pulls blood toward the chest cavity. When the airway finally opens again, pressure rebounds, and the heart must adapt instantly. These rapid shifts in intrathoracic pressure resemble hundreds of small stress tests every night. Over time, the heart muscle thickens to compensate, and electrical conduction patterns start to change. Electrocardiogram studies reveal transient arrhythmias, irregular heartbeats, during apnea events that disappear when airflow normalizes. Oxygen desaturation amplifies the problem. Hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells, releases its load more quickly during these low oxygen phases. The body responds by producing more red cells to capture extra oxygen, slightly thickening the blood. This increase in viscosity forces the heart to work harder to pump it through the network of vessels. Meanwhile, the inner lining of arteries, called the endothelium, senses these constant surges and dips in oxygen. It reacts by releasing inflammatory molecules and reducing nitric oxide production, which normally keeps vessels relaxed. The result is stiffness, higher blood pressure, and lower adaptability. Cardiologists now classify sleep apnea as an independent risk factor for coronary artery disease. In one longitudinal study from the University of Wisconsin, participants with severe untreated apnea had nearly a threefold increase in fatal heart events over 18 years compared with those without apnea. What's remarkable is that treatment reversed much of this risk. After consistent CPAP therapy, cardiovascular mortality rates dropped to levels similar to healthy controls, demonstrating that prevention is achievable once breathing is stabilized. Blood pressure patterns also change dramatically. Normally, pressure dips at night by about 10%, giving arteries a chance to rest. In sleep apnea, that dip disappears. Continuous sympathetic activation keeps vessels constricted even during rest. Doctors call this a non-dipping pattern, strongly associated with stroke and kidney damage. When therapy restores deep sleep, the normal nocturnal dip returns within weeks, showing how quickly the body can reset once nightly alarms stop. The lungs experience secondary effects as well. During each obstruction, carbon dioxide accumulates and oxygen saturation drops. The pulmonary arteries constrict in response, raising pressure inside the lung circulation, a condition known as pulmonary hypertension. Over months or years, this extra load strains the right side of the heart, which pumps blood into the lungs. Symptoms include swelling in the ankles, fatigue, and shortness of breath during exertion. Again, the good news is reversibility. Continuous positive airway pressure relieves the strain, and pressures fall back toward normal. From a cellular perspective, every apnea event is a miniature hypoxic challenge. Mitochondria, the cell's energy producers, sense the drop in oxygen and shift temporarily into less efficient modes of energy production. If this happens repeatedly, oxidative byproducts accumulate and cell membranes suffer damage. This explains why tissues such as heart muscle and brain matter show early signs of aging in untreated apnea patients. Clinical trials now explore whether antioxidants or lifestyle interventions that enhance mitochondrial health can complement mechanical treatments to reduce long-term complications. Neurologically, oxygen fluctuations create complex feedback loops. Chemoreceptors in the carotid arteries detect the lack of oxygen and send emergency signals to the brainstem. The brainstem responds by increasing sympathetic tone, accelerating heart rate and constricting vessels to maintain oxygen delivery. When the airway opens, the reflex overshoots, leaving the body momentarily in a hyperactive state. This repeated pattern keeps the autonomic nervous system on edge, even during the day. Heart rate variability studies confirm that apnea patients have lower parasympathetic, or rest and digest, activity, meaning their bodies remain stuck in mild fight or flight mode. After treatment, variability improves, reflecting restored autonomic balance. An emerging area of research looks at how apnea interacts with other sleep disorders. Restless leg syndrome and insomnia often coexist, compounding fatigue. In these cases, fragmented breathing and movement disturbances feed each other. Correcting apnea first often reduces the severity of the secondary disorder, highlighting how interlinked the brain's sleep networks are. Researchers also discovered that altitude influences apnea severity. At higher elevations, oxygen concentration drops, and even people without prior symptoms can develop temporary central sleep apnea until their bodies acclimate. This phenomenon guided new therapeutic ideas. By gently adjusting oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, scientists can retrain breathing control centers to become more stable. Experimental treatments include low-dose oxygen or carbon dioxide rebreathing under supervision, aiming to recalibrate sensitivity of the brain's respiratory centers. All these findings converge on a simple truth: stable breathing equals systemic stability. When airflow remains uninterrupted, blood pressure normalizes, heart rhythm steadies, and oxygen supply remains consistent across every organ. When that stability breaks, even for seconds, the body reacts as if facing a danger, mobilizing stress responses designed for survival, not rest. Night after night, that misplaced alarm reshapes health from the inside out. So, as you continue to listen, notice the steadiness of your own breathing. Each calm, even breath you take tonight is a signal of order returning to your body. The same order scientists work to protect when they treat sleep apnea, one breath at a time. Sleep apnea deeply disturbs metabolism because oxygen and sleep regulate nearly every hormone that manages energy balance. Each time breathing pauses, the body interprets it as stress. Cortisol rises sharply, preparing the body for an emergency that never happens. When this pattern repeats hundreds of times, cortisol stays elevated, leading to chronic stress chemistry even during the day. Elevated cortisol suppresses insulin sensitivity, encourages fat storage, and breaks down muscle tissue. It's one reason people with untreated sleep apnea often struggle with weight management despite diet and exercise efforts. Researchers at Johns Hopkins found that after controlling for age, diet, and physical activity, adults with untreated apnea burned fewer calories at rest compared to those without apnea. The body becomes metabolically conservative, holding on to fat as if anticipating repeated nightly oxygen shortages. When therapy restores normal breathing, resting energy expenditure increases again, showing that proper oxygen delivery reactivates the body's natural metabolism. Another key player is insulin. Normally, during deep sleep, the body becomes more insulin sensitive, allowing glucose from meals to be stored efficiently. Fragmented sleep reverses that pattern. Insulin resistance develops, meaning blood sugar remains elevated even when insulin levels are high. Over time, this contributes to type 2 diabetes. In large studies, people with severe apnea were up to 3 times more likely to develop diabetes within 10 years. Fortunately, effective apnea treatment improves insulin sensitivity within weeks, even before weight changes occur, proving that sleep quality directly influences glucose control. Growth hormone secretion is also tied to deep sleep. This hormone promotes tissue repair and muscle recovery. When apnea prevents sustained slow-wave sleep, growth hormone output decreases. The result is slower recovery from exercise, reduced muscle tone, and a tendency towards central fat accumulation. This hormonal imbalance adds to the cycle that maintains or worsens apnea, since extra fat around the neck and abdomen increases airway collapse risk. The thyroid can be affected as well. Sleep deprivation and intermittent hypoxia interfere with thyroid-stimulating hormone rhythms. Some patients with long-term apnea present borderline hypothyroidism that normalizes after months of consistent therapy, suggesting that correcting breathing restores hormonal equilibrium across multiple systems. Sex hormones are not exempt. In men, testosterone levels often fall because of disrupted REM sleep, the stage when testosterone secretion peaks. Lower testosterone contributes to reduced energy, mood changes, and decreased muscle mass. In women, apnea correlates with menstrual irregularities and exacerbated menopausal symptoms, likely due to shared pathways involving cortisol and oxygen sensitivity. Studies have shown that after treatment, hormone levels tend to normalize and symptoms improve. Mitochondria, the small powerhouses inside cells, depend on continuous oxygen flow to generate ATP, the energy molecule. Intermittent hypoxia pushes them to switch back and forth between aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. This instability generates more reactive oxygen species, damaging mitochondrial membranes. Over months, energy efficiency drops, and fatigue persists even after long sleep periods. Once apnea is treated, oxygen supply stabilizes and mitochondria recover, restoring the sense of daytime vitality. Leptin and ghrelin, the hormones that regulate appetite, also follow sleep patterns. Leptin signals fullness. Ghrelin triggers hunger. In fragmented sleep, leptin decreases while ghrelin increases, stimulating appetite, especially for calorie-dense foods. This makes nighttime snacking and overeating more likely, feeding into weight gain and worsening apnea. That's why many patients notice spontaneous appetite, control improvements after therapy, without consciously changing diet. Scientists now describe sleep apnea as a multi-system accelerator of aging. By elevating oxidative stress, reducing growth hormone, disrupting insulin and cortisol balance, and altering mitochondrial function, apnea mimics the biochemical profile of premature aging. Treating it effectively can reverse many of these changes, improving not only sleep but also cellular health. Recent studies explore whether specific diets can help reduce apnea severity. Diets rich in antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, and anti-inflammatory compounds, like those found in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and fish, appear to support airway stability and reduce inflammatory markers. Avoiding late-night heavy meals and alcohol also prevents further muscle relaxation in the throat. Researchers emphasize that while nutrition alone cannot cure apnea, it can optimize the internal environment to make treatments more effective. Physical activity plays a strong role too. Aerobic exercise strengthens respiratory muscles and improves oxygen efficiency, while weight training increases basal metabolism. In one clinical trial, a combination of moderate exercise and weight loss reduced apnea severity by over 60%, even before mechanical devices were introduced. The mechanism is partly anatomical, reducing fat around the neck, but also neurological, as exercise recalibrates the brain's control of breathing rhythm. For people who spend long hours seated or have sedentary jobs, circulation tends to slow, promoting fluid accumulation in the lower body. When lying down at night, that fluid shifts upward, narrowing the throat. Simple measures such as standing frequently, walking short distances, and elevating the legs before bed can reduce this effect, improving nighttime breathing. It's a reminder that small daily habits influence even the most complex physiological systems. Every part of this chain, from oxygen to hormones, metabolism, and energy, illustrates how sleep apnea quietly rewires the body's internal balance. It doesn't just cause tiredness, it changes the way energy is produced, used, and stored. Correcting it means restoring the body's original blueprint, efficient, rhythmic, and self-healing. Take another calm, deep breath in and exhale slowly. Let your body remember how it feels to breathe freely. That flow of oxygen, steady and constant, is the foundation of health, energy, and renewal. The brain relies on deep, continuous sleep to reorganize information gathered during the day. When breathing stops and oxygen levels drop, those consolidation cycles are interrupted. In laboratory studies, EEG recordings show that even brief apnea episodes cause microarousals that reset brainwave patterns. Each reset breaks the chain of neural replay that normally stores new memories. Over time, this fragmentation results in weaker recall and slower learning. Researchers at the University of California used functional MRI to map oxygen changes in real time. They discovered that during apnea, the hippocampus, the memory hub, experiences rapid drops in oxygen saturation of up to 20%. After the episode ends, blood rushes back, producing oxidative stress that damages delicate neural connections. In animal models, repeated cycles of hypoxia reduce synaptic density, the tiny bridges between neurons responsible for learning. When these animals are later treated with stable oxygen supply, the brain rebuilds those connections within weeks. This confirms that the damage is functional, not permanent, as long as breathing is restored. Concentration problems often stem from the prefrontal cortex, the region governing attention and decision-making. PET scans reveal lower glucose metabolism there in untreated apnea patients, meaning the area receives less energy. The result is what clinicians call sleep-related cognitive fog, difficulty staying alert, multitasking, or processing new information. Once treatment begins, prefrontal metabolism normalizes and reaction times improve. In one clinical trial, participants reported clearer thinking after just 5 nights of stable breathing, demonstrating how quickly the brain recovers when oxygen delivery returns to normal. Emotional control depends on steady communication between the amygdala and the frontal lobes. Oxygen fluctuations heighten amygdala activity while weakening inhibitory signals from the cortex. This imbalance makes emotional responses stronger and regulation weaker, explaining the higher rates of irritability, anxiety, and mood swings among untreated patients. Researchers observed that after continuous positive airway pressure therapy, amygdala reactivity decreased by 30%, aligning more closely with healthy sleepers. The link between sleep apnea and depression has been confirmed in multiple population studies. People with moderate to severe apnea are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience major depressive episodes. The likely mechanism involves disrupted REM sleep, when most emotional processing occurs, and reduced serotonin signaling caused by chronic hypoxia. Encouragingly, depression scores often drop significantly within 2 months of starting treatment, sometimes even allowing reduction of medication doses under medical supervision. Memory type also matters. Procedural memory, skills like typing or playing an instrument, depends on sleep spindles in stage 2 sleep. Declarative memory, facts and events, depends on slow-wave sleep. Sleep apnea fragments both, so skill learning and factual recall decline together. When scientists restored normal breathing in volunteers, the number of sleep spindles doubled, and memory test scores returned to baseline within 2 weeks. These results highlight how vital breathing stability is for every form of mental performance. Long-term consequences can extend into neurodegenerative disease. Epidemiological studies show that untreated sleep apnea increases the risk of mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. One proposed pathway involves beta amyloid clearance. During deep sleep, cerebrospinal fluid washes through the brain, removing waste proteins. Fragmented sleep reduces this clearance, allowing toxic buildup. Autopsy and imaging studies find higher amyloid levels in apnea patients, especially in memory-related regions. However, consistent therapy restores normal clearance cycles, suggesting that treating apnea may slow or prevent cognitive decline. Brainwave analysis reveals another subtle effect: a shift in overall oscillation power toward faster, lighter frequencies. This keeps the sleeper in a semi-alert state, reducing the amount of time spent in restorative delta waves. Clinicians often notice that after therapy, delta power increases markedly, corresponding to deeper, more refreshing sleep. Patients describe it as waking up clear for the first time in years. Children with sleep apnea show unique cognitive patterns. They may struggle with attention and school performance rather than daytime sleepiness. MRI studies show reversible gray matter reductions in brain areas responsible for behavior and language. After surgical or medical treatment, both structure and performance improve, demonstrating the remarkable plasticity of the young brain when oxygen flow is restored early. The overall message is consistent: the brain cannot separate breathing from thinking. Every neuron depends on steady oxygen to process, store, and regulate information. Disrupt that supply, and the mind slows down. Restore it, and clarity returns. This relationship explains why apnea treatment often feels like mental rejuvenation. Patients frequently describe sharper focus, better mood, and renewed motivation within days. Tangible proof that the brain was simply waiting for stable rest. Take a slow breath now, and notice the calm that comes with oxygen moving freely. This simple rhythm is what keeps the mind balanced and the thoughts organized through the night. Science shows that protecting it means protecting everything the brain does, from remembering faces to feeling joy. When sleep apnea goes untreated for years, its impact extends beyond fatigue. It influences cellular aging at a measurable level. Every cell in the body contains protective DNA segments called telomeres, caps at the ends of chromosomes that shorten each time a cell divides. Chronic oxidative stress from nightly oxygen drops accelerates this shortening. In several large studies, individuals with untreated sleep apnea had telomeres resembling those of people 10 years older. The good news is that after 6 months of consistent therapy, telomere length stabilized, showing that slowing biological aging is possible once oxygen balance returns. The same oxidative stress affects mitochondria, the power units of cells. Microscopic analyses show that intermittent hypoxia reduces mitochondrial density in muscle tissue and the heart. This decreases endurance and contributes to persistent tiredness even after long sleep. After treatment, mitochondrial number and function rebound, restoring energy output. Patients often describe this as a gradual but profound transformation. Days feel longer, alertness returns earlier, and small daily tasks require less effort. Inflammation is another pathway linking apnea to aging. Continuous surges of stress hormones increase cytokine levels that silently damage blood vessels. Over time, this raises the risk of atherosclerosis. Imaging studies reveal thicker arterial walls in untreated patients compared with those who use therapy. However, once breathing normalizes, vessel thickness often regresses, a sign that the body can repair itself when nightly stress signals stop. The kidneys, too, feel the effects of oxygen instability. They regulate fluid balance and blood pressure through delicate chemical loops. When oxygen levels fluctuate, those loops misfire, promoting sodium retention and fluid buildup. Over months, this contributes to hypertension. After several months of treatment, kidney filtration markers typically improve and swelling subsides, illustrating again how quickly organs adapt once stability returns. Life expectancy studies paint a clear picture. Severe untreated sleep apnea can shorten lifespan by an average of 6 to 10 years, largely due to cardiovascular complications. Yet, among patients who adhere to therapy, mortality rates drop dramatically. One multinational study following 10,000 participants found that consistent nightly use of CPAP reduced all-cause mortality by nearly 40%. Researchers conclude that correcting apnea is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to extend healthy life. Recovery, however, follows stages. In the first weeks, daytime sleepiness fades as oxygen delivery normalizes. After about a month, mood and mental clarity improve. Within 3 to 6 months, blood pressure and glucose control stabilize, and inflammatory markers fall. By a year, cardiovascular risk decreases significantly, and many patients report restored stamina and memory. These timeframes show that the body heals gradually but reliably when nightly rest becomes uninterrupted. Another remarkable finding comes from the field of epigenetics, the study of how environment changes gene activity without altering DNA itself. Intermittent hypoxia modifies chemical markers on genes controlling inflammation and metabolism, essentially turning harmful pathways on. When therapy restores oxygen, those epigenetic markers reverse. This means that treating apnea doesn't only stop damage, it can literally rewrite how genes behave, shifting the body back toward a healthier state. Researchers have also examined how apnea interacts with other age-related diseases. For example, in people with hypertension, treating apnea often reduces the number of medications needed. In those with type 2 diabetes, glucose levels drop. Even in early-stage heart failure, stabilizing breathing improves cardiac output and exercise capacity. These broad effects show that apnea sits at the intersection of many chronic illnesses. Managing it provides a multiplier benefit across multiple systems. Physical rehabilitation gains new efficiency once oxygen stability returns. Muscles receive consistent fuel, and endurance improves. Exercise tolerance tests confirm that after 3 months of therapy, maximal oxygen consumption rises by 15 to 20%. That translates into walking farther, climbing stairs more easily, and maintaining a steadier heart rate under stress. For many, this renewed physical ability reinforces adherence to treatment. Better performance becomes its own motivation. Patients often wonder whether the body ever fully resets after years of disturbance. The answer depends on duration and severity, but most evidence shows substantial reversibility. Brain structure scans, vascular imaging, hormonal profiles, and inflammatory markers all move toward normal ranges within months. What doesn't return as easily is untreated time. The longer apnea persists, the longer repair takes. This underlines the importance of early detection and consistent follow-through once therapy begins. Sleep scientists summarize recovery in one phrase: restore rhythm, restore health. Every organ follows rhythm. Heartbeat, hormone release, digestion, and temperature all rely on predictable timing cues. Apnea breaks those rhythms every few seconds. Once the pattern is repaired, systems realign naturally without further intervention. The body is built to recover. It only needs uninterrupted rest to do so. As you breathe calmly now, notice how even a single steady minute feels restorative. Imagine the effect multiplied across entire nights, weeks, and years. That is what apnea therapy offers, not a new state, but the restoration of what should have been happening all along. Preventing sleep apnea starts with understanding its mechanical nature. The airway is a flexible tube of muscle and soft tissue. Anything that narrows or weakens it increases collapse risk. Maintaining a healthy weight remains the most effective prevention. Even a 5% reduction in body mass can markedly improve airflow. Excess fat around the neck presses inward, reducing the diameter of the airway. Losing that small amount relieves pressure and often eliminates snoring entirely. Posture during sleep also matters. When lying on the back, gravity pulls the tongue and soft palate backward, blocking airflow. Side sleeping keeps the passage open. Simple positional devices, from small backpacks that prevent rolling onto the back to smart pillows that vibrate gently when snoring begins, train the body to maintain the most open angle. Researchers call this positional therapy, and for mild to moderate apnea, it can cut events by half without machines or surgery. Avoiding sedatives and alcohol before bedtime is another direct way to reduce episodes. Both relax airway muscles excessively and dull the brain's natural breathing response. A light evening meal instead of a heavy one prevents reflux, which can inflame the throat and narrow the airway further. Each of these adjustments seems small, yet together they significantly improve breathing stability. Technological innovation is reshaping therapy. Traditional CPAP machines have evolved into quieter, smarter systems that automatically detect resistance and adjust pressure breath by breath. Some models link to mobile apps, allowing users and doctors to monitor progress in real time. For those who cannot tolerate masks, oral appliances that gently shift the lower jaw forward remain an option. They are smaller, portable, and especially useful for travelers. Surgical solutions continue to advance as well. Modern techniques focus on precision rather than large structural changes. Procedures such as radiofrequency ablation shrink excess tissue without cutting, while robotic surgery can reposition the tongue base with minimal trauma. Another breakthrough is hypoglossal nerve stimulation, a small implant that detects inspiration and sends a gentle pulse to move the tongue forward, keeping the airway clear. Early trials show dramatic improvement in breathing and sleep quality. Emerging research explores non-invasive brain training for central sleep apnea by stimulating specific areas of the brainstem with mild electrical or magnetic pulses. Scientists hope to strengthen the natural rhythm generator that controls breathing. Though still experimental, this approach could benefit people whose apnea arises not from obstruction, but from disrupted neurological signaling. Environmental control plays a subtler but real role. Clean, humidified air reduces irritation that can trigger swelling inside the nose and throat. Regularly washing bedding removes allergens that inflame tissues. Keeping bedroom humidity around 40 to 50% maintains airway comfort. Temperature also affects muscle tone. Slightly cooler rooms support deeper sleep by promoting natural thermoregulation. Psychological stress can intensify apnea indirectly. Chronic tension tightens neck and jaw muscles during the day and alters nighttime breathing patterns. Relaxation techniques such as slow diaphragmatic breathing, progressive muscle release, and mindfulness before bed can help normalize respiration. These methods lower sympathetic tone and prepare the body for steady sleep. They are not replacements for medical therapy, but valuable complements. Screening and early diagnosis remain essential. Many people live for years without realizing that pauses in breathing disrupt their nights. Family members often notice first, describing loud snoring followed by silence and sudden gasps. Daytime indicators include morning headaches, dry mouth, and difficulty concentrating. Modern home tests provide reliable, preliminary data. Professional sleep studies confirm the diagnosis. Recognizing symptoms early prevents long-term complications and reduces treatment intensity. Public awareness campaigns are beginning to shift perceptions. For decades, snoring was dismissed as a harmless annoyance. Now it is recognized as a potential warning sign. Health systems worldwide encourage primary care doctors to ask simple questions about sleep quality and tiredness. In workplaces, fatigue management programs educate employees about apnea's risks, linking good sleep to productivity and safety. Future therapies may combine multiple strategies: mechanical support, pharmacological aids, and digital monitoring, creating personalized treatment ecosystems. Pharmaceutical research focuses on drugs that increase upper airway muscle tone without disturbing sleep architecture. If successful, these medications could provide relief to millions who struggle with mask use. Artificial intelligence algorithms already analyze breathing patterns to predict optimal pressure settings and detect early device leaks, improving comfort and adherence. For those already diagnosed, consistency is the single greatest predictor of success. Wearing a CPAP mask every night, even for short naps, trains the brain to expect steady airflow. Skipping nights resets progress. Doctors recommend routine follow-ups to adjust pressure and replace worn parts, ensuring therapy remains effective. Support groups and online communities help users share solutions for dryness, fit, and noise. Small adjustments that transform tolerance into long-term habit. Sleep specialists emphasize that treatment does more than prevent complications. It enhances daily life. People describe waking up alert, remembering dreams again, and no longer feeling trapped in a fog of exhaustion. Partners notice the quiet. Energy returns, mood stabilizes, and patience grows. These personal victories illustrate how tightly oxygen, rest, and emotional balance intertwine. Finally, prevention extends to lifestyle design. Regular exercise, balanced meals, and consistent sleep schedules strengthen circadian rhythms that guide hormonal repair. Avoiding late caffeine and bright screens preserves melatonin release, ensuring faster sleep onset. Even simple acts like stretching the neck and practicing nasal breathing before bed can prepare the airway for an uninterrupted night. As we conclude this first hour, remember that sleep apnea is both common and controllable. It affects every system, but yields quickly to awareness and steady care. Understanding the science behind each breath transforms treatment from a burden into a form of self-maintenance, a nightly reminder that the body wants to heal when given the chance. Take one more slow breath in and exhale gently. The rhythm you feel now is what medicine strives to preserve: steady, calm, and effortless. With knowledge, attention, and the right tools, every night can return to that quiet balance. Every breath you take begins long before air enters your lungs. It starts in the brainstem, a small but vital region at the base of the skull that acts like an internal metronome. It receives continuous updates from sensors spread through the body, chemical detectors in the carotid arteries, stretch receptors in the lungs, and nerve endings in the chest wall. Together, they measure oxygen, carbon dioxide, and acidity, adjusting breathing automatically without conscious thought. In healthy sleep, this network maintains a steady rhythm, regardless of position or dreaming. But in sleep apnea, something interrupts that precision. In obstructive apnea, the brain sends signals correctly, but the airway collapses. In central apnea, those brainstem signals become irregular. The difference may seem small, yet the outcome feels the same: a pause in breathing and a drop in oxygen. Genetic research now shows that both forms share underlying pathways. Specific genes influence how sensitive the brain is to carbon dioxide and how much muscle tone supports the airway. Variations in genes controlling serotonin, which helps regulate muscle tension in the upper airway, have been linked to higher apnea risk. Another cluster of genes governs the size and shape of facial bones, determining how much space exists behind the tongue. Twin studies confirm this hereditary pattern. When one identical twin has apnea, the chance the other does too is significantly higher than in non-identical pairs. These findings explain why some lean individuals still develop severe apnea, while others with obesity do not. Their airway structure and neural control are genetically predisposed to instability. Researchers hope that genetic mapping will soon allow screening for risk early in life, guiding preventive habits before symptoms appear. At the molecular level, the body relies on sensors called peripheral chemoreceptors to detect oxygen. They sit in small structures called the carotid bodies, located on each side of the neck where the carotid arteries divide. When oxygen drops, these sensors send rapid signals to increase breathing effort. In sleep apnea, repeated stimulation makes them hypersensitive. Over time, they trigger overreactions even to small oxygen changes, leading to unstable breathing known as loop gain. Imagine a thermostat that overcorrects temperature swings. Each adjustment overshoots, causing oscillations. In the same way, high loop gain causes breathing to alternate between overventilation and underventilation, sustaining the cycle of apnea events. Modern imaging has allowed scientists to observe these reactions in real time. Using near-infrared spectroscopy, they can measure oxygen saturation directly in the brain while monitoring airflow and heart rate. During an apnea episode, the data reveals synchronized drops across multiple systems. Brain, heart, and muscles all experience microdesaturations within seconds. The pattern is predictable. Oxygen falls, heart rate slows briefly, then surges as the brain awakens the body. Recognizing this pattern helps doctors classify severity and design individualized pressure or stimulation therapies. One of the most fascinating recent discoveries involves the role of astrocytes. Supportive brain cells once thought passive. They help regulate breathing rhythm by releasing chemical messengers that fine-tune the sensitivity of neurons in the brainstem. When exposed to intermittent hypoxia, astrocytes increase their release of adenosine, a molecule that normally induces sleepiness. This excess adenosine may explain why people with apnea feel unusually tired during the day even when total sleep hours seem sufficient. Restoring normal oxygen levels gradually resets this chemical balance, improving alertness. Circadian biology adds another layer. The body's internal clock coordinates hormone secretion, metabolism, and breathing patterns over 24 hours. During the night, breathing becomes slightly slower and less forceful because metabolic demand is lower. In people with apnea, This natural slowdown amplifies the tendency toward airway collapse. Late-night surges in melatonin and decreases in cortisol relax throat muscles further. Understanding this relationship has led to experiments timing medication or therapy adjustments according to circadian phase, a field called chronotherapy. Early data suggests that aligning treatment schedules with each person's biological night improves adherence and effectiveness. Inflammatory genes also fluctuate with circadian rhythm. When sleep is fragmented, their timing drifts, leading to persistent inflammation even during the day. Scientists measure this by tracking cytokine expression across 24-hour cycles. In untreated apnea, those cycles flatten. After therapy, they regain normal peaks and troughs. This rhythmic recovery may explain why consistent nightly use of devices produces benefits beyond oxygen stability. It resets the entire timing system of cellular repair. Another internal mechanism under study is the so-called apneic threshold. This is the carbon dioxide level below which breathing temporarily stops. During sleep, if ventilation increases too much and CO2 drops below that threshold, the brain pauses breathing until levels rise again. People with central apnea often have an unstable threshold, meaning small changes in CO2 trigger big swings in breathing effort. Treatments that slightly raise baseline CO2, such as adaptive servoventilation or controlled rebreathing, help stabilize this response. The goal is not more oxygen, but steadier chemistry. Newer research even connects sleep apnea to the lymphatic clearance system of the brain, known as the lymphatic network. This system removes waste products when cerebrospinal fluid flows along vessels during deep sleep. Repeated microarousals disrupt that flow, allowing metabolic waste to accumulate. When breathing normalizes, lymphatic circulation resumes, potentially reducing risk for neurodegenerative diseases. The discovery has turned apnea from a simple respiratory disorder into a broader neurological concern. Understanding these biological roots gives doctors more precise targets. Rather than one general treatment, future care may combine genetic screening, chemical stabilization, and mechanical support. Each element addresses a different level of the same system, from DNA to nerve to airway. Take a slow breath now and feel the chain reaction it represents. Your brain detects the movement, sensors adjust blood flow, cells sense oxygen, and balance returns. That single rhythm reflects the complexity science works to protect in sleep apnea. The simple act of breathing, made stable again through knowledge and care. Every organ in the body relies on oxygen, not only to survive, but to manage its own internal repair schedule. When oxygen delivery becomes unstable, the signals that tell cells when to rest and when to regenerate lose precision. Sleep apnea transforms this nightly maintenance window into a fragmented process, slowing recovery from everyday wear and tear. Inside each cell, small structures called mitochondria handle energy production. They combine oxygen with nutrients to create adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. When oxygen drops even briefly, mitochondria switch to a less efficient backup process known as anaerobic glycolysis. This keeps cells alive, but produces lactic acid and free radicals. Over time, these byproducts trigger low-grade inflammation, one of the hallmarks of sleep apnea damage. The body interprets this as chronic stress, increasing the release of cortisol and other stress mediators. Gene expression studies reveal that intermittent hypoxia activates more than 100 genes related to inflammation and oxidative stress. Among them is hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha, or HIF-1 alpha, a master switch that helps cells adapt to low oxygen. During normal exercise, HIF-1 alpha rises briefly, encouraging blood vessel growth and energy efficiency. But in apnea, it stays active all night, prompting unnecessary vessel remodeling and thickening of arterial walls. When treatment restores steady breathing, HIF-1 alpha activity returns to baseline, and inflammatory genes quiet down. At the liver level, oxygen fluctuations disturb glucose metabolism. The liver is responsible for balancing sugar release during fasting and storage after meals. Apnea shifts this balance toward constant glucose output, raising fasting blood sugar. It also interferes with the breakdown of cholesterol, contributing to higher triglycerides and LDL levels. In clinical studies, patients using continuous positive airway pressure for just 3 months showed significant reductions in these lipid markers, emphasizing how quickly metabolism responds to oxygen stability. Another important system affected is the endothelium, the thin lining of blood vessels. It acts as both barrier and signaling surface, producing nitric oxide to keep vessels flexible. Repeated hypoxia suppresses nitric oxide production, stiffening arteries and impairing blood flow. When therapy restores oxygen, nitric oxide levels rise within days, proving that vascular flexibility can return surprisingly fast once nightly stress ends. In muscles, chronic fatigue from apnea reflects more than lost sleep. Biopsies show decreased capillary density and reduced mitochondrial enzymes, meaning muscles receive less blood and process less oxygen. With treatment, these deficits reverse. Patients often report that their legs feel lighter and endurance increases, a sign of improved microcirculation. The kidneys experience constant adjustment during apnea. Every oxygen dip causes them to release erythropoietin, a hormone that stimulates red blood cell production. Over time, this leads to mild polycythemia, an increase in blood thickness that further strains the heart. As breathing stabilizes, erythropoietin levels normalize, and blood viscosity returns to normal. At the hormonal level, oxygen instability disrupts the nightly pulse of growth hormone, which peaks during slow-wave sleep. This hormone supports cell renewal in nearly every tissue. Fragmented sleep suppresses its release, slowing healing of muscles, skin, and internal organs. Studies measuring collagen production show that untreated apnea patients repair wounds almost 30% more slowly. Once treatment begins, growth hormone secretion and tissue regeneration rates improve, demonstrating how oxygen directly governs the pace of recovery. On a molecular scale, oxidative stress from apnea changes the way DNA is packaged. Chemical tags called methyl groups accumulate in regions controlling antioxidant enzymes, reducing their expression. Essentially, the body's defense systems become quieter while damage signals grow louder. When oxygen flow normalizes, methylation patterns gradually reset. This process, though microscopic, reflects the body's broader resilience, the ability to rewrite stress history when stability returns. Metabolomic analyses, comprehensive studies of molecules in the blood, show a distinctive fingerprint in apnea patients: elevated fatty acids, lactate, and inflammatory mediators. After consistent therapy, that fingerprint shifts toward normal within 6 to 12 weeks. These measurable biochemical corrections give researchers objective proof that treating sleep apnea restores systemic balance, not just subjective well-being. Breathing stability also influences the body's antioxidant capacity. Vitamin C and E, glutathione, and superoxide dismutase act as cellular shields. In untreated apnea, their levels drop because they are consumed faster than replenished. Once therapy stops, nightly oxygen swings These protective molecules rebuild, strengthening resistance to oxidative damage from other causes like pollution or poor diet. The sum of these effects shows that sleep apnea is not a simple airflow problem, but a whole body energy disorder. It destabilizes metabolism, rewires gene activity, and slows repair, yet the body's capacity to recover remains strong. With regular, stable breathing, chemical balance begins to restore itself within days, cellular recovery follows within weeks, and full metabolic normalization can occur within months. Take a gentle breath now and notice how effortless it feels. That steady rhythm is what each cell depends on to perform its nightly repair. Every consistent inhalation feeds thousands of processes, silently maintaining health. Science's goal is simply to keep that rhythm undisturbed. Every night of unstable breathing trains the immune system to stay on alert. What begins as a short-term defense against low oxygen becomes a long-term pattern of overreaction. In the blood of people with untreated sleep apnea, white cell counts run slightly higher than normal, especially neutrophils and monocytes. These cells release enzymes and free radicals meant to destroy bacteria, but in the absence of infection, they damage healthy tissue instead. The result is a constant, low-grade inflammation that spreads silently through the body. Laboratory measurements confirm this pattern. C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha levels all rise after just a few nights of intermittent hypoxia. Each of these markers predicts future heart disease, showing how inflammation links apnea to vascular damage. When therapy restores normal breathing, those same markers drop within weeks, and vessel function improves measurably. Inside blood vessels, immune activation changes the behavior of endothelial cells. They begin expressing adhesion molecules that make white cells stick to the vessel wall. Over time, this creates small inflammatory patches that attract cholesterol and calcium, the seeds of atherosclerotic plaque. Imaging studies using ultrasound and CT scanning show thicker carotid artery walls in untreated apnea patients. Once oxygen stability returns, plaque progression slows or reverses, proving that these early vascular changes are not permanent. The heart's own immune environment shifts as well. Hypoxia triggers macrophages in cardiac tissue to release growth factors that remodel muscle fibers. Initially, this helps the heart adapt, but chronic stimulation causes stiffening of the ventricular walls. That stiffness explains why some patients feel short of breath, even when the lungs are clear. Effective therapy reduces macrophage activation and restores normal elasticity, demonstrating how tightly the immune and mechanical systems are intertwined. The link between apnea and metabolic disease also runs through inflammation. Cytokines produced during nightly oxygen drops interfere with insulin signaling, making it harder for cells to absorb glucose. At the same time, they alter fat cell chemistry, encouraging storage rather than release of energy. This dual effect drives weight gain and type 2 diabetes, closing the feedback loop that worsens apnea itself. When the inflammatory signal quiets after treatment, insulin sensitivity improves, and body weight often begins to fall naturally. Cancer research has recently turned attention to sleep apnea. Intermittent hypoxia acts as a kind of stress training for tumors, stimulating blood vessel growth through the same HIF-1 alpha pathway that helps healthy tissue adapt to low oxygen. Animal experiments show that cancers exposed to fluctuating oxygen grow faster than those in stable environments. Human data remain early, but several large cohorts have found higher rates of certain cancers, particularly kidney, breast, and pancreatic, in severe untreated apnea. Importantly, This excess risk disappears among patients who adhere to therapy, suggesting that oxygen stability neutralizes the advantage tumors gain from hypoxia. The gut is another target. Trillions of bacteria live in the intestines, producing molecules that influence immunity and metabolism. In sleep apnea, repeated oxygen deprivation changes the gut environment, favoring species that thrive on inflammation. Stool analyses reveal reduced diversity and higher levels of endotoxin-producing bacteria. These substances leak through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream, fueling systemic inflammation. Restoring normal breathing gradually rebalances the microbiome, increasing beneficial species that produce short-chain fatty acids, which calm immune responses. Even the blood-brain barrier, the shield that separates brain tissue from circulating toxins, becomes more permeable during chronic apnea. Animal studies demonstrate that intermittent hypoxia loosens tight junctions between endothelial cells, allowing inflammatory molecules to reach the brain. This may contribute to cognitive decline and mood changes seen in patients. Continuous therapy retightens those junctions, restoring the barrier's integrity and protecting neural tissue from further stress. Another subtle effect involves bone metabolism. Inflammation and low oxygen stimulate cells that break down bone faster than those that build it, increasing osteoporosis risk. After breathing normalization, bone density scans often show stabilization or gradual improvement, linking skeletal health to nightly oxygen supply. All of these findings highlight a single principle: stability of oxygen equals stability of immunity. When that rhythm falters, inflammation spreads across every system. When it steadies, the body reverts to equilibrium without additional intervention. Take a gentle breath in and notice the stillness that follows. That quiet reflects what happens internally when the immune system finally rests, a return from constant readiness to calm balance. The nervous system is one of the most sensitive to oxygen instability. Neurons rely on constant, high-energy fuel to transmit signals, maintain membrane potential, and reset after every impulse. Even brief drops in oxygen impair these functions, leading to slower reactions, misfiring circuits, and altered mood regulation. In sleep apnea, these disruptions accumulate every night, reshaping the way the brain processes information and manages stress. Sensory nerves become more reactive when exposed to intermittent hypoxia. This increases pain sensitivity, a condition known as hyperalgesia. People with untreated apnea often report waking with aching muscles, tender joints, or headaches despite no injury or illness. Brain imaging confirms that regions involved in pain processing, especially the thalamus and anterior cingulate cortex, show elevated activity during fragmented sleep. When oxygen delivery normalizes, this heightened state settles down, and the threshold for pain rises again. The vagus nerve, a major part of the parasympathetic nervous system, also plays a central role. It regulates digestion, heart rate, and mood by carrying signals from the brain to internal organs. During sleep apnea, reduced vagal tone leads to less flexibility in these systems. Heart rate becomes more fixed, digestion slows, and emotional reactivity increases. After weeks of continuous therapy, heart rate variability improves, a clear sign that parasympathetic tone is returning. This shift supports not only cardiovascular stability, but also emotional resilience. REM sleep, the phase associated with vivid dreaming and emotional processing, is heavily disrupted by apnea. The body enters REM multiple times per night, but if breathing pauses occur during these phases, the brain cuts them short, Without full REM cycles, people become more emotionally reactive and less able to process stress. Research shows that lack of REM amplifies activity in the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, while reducing control from the prefrontal cortex, which normally keeps responses in check. This imbalance explains why untreated sleep apnea is linked with irritability, anxiety, and depression. Cognitive functions suffer in parallel. Attention, planning, and decision-making all require coordination between brain regions. Oxygen drops slow this coordination. In memory tests, people with apnea consistently perform worse on tasks, requiring sustained concentration, spatial awareness, or word recall. Fortunately, these effects are not fixed. After just 1 month of stable breathing, cognitive scores begin to recover, and after 3 months, most functions return to baseline or better. Even language skills can be affected. Functional MRI scans show lower activation in language-related areas during verbal tasks in people with severe apnea. This translates into slower word retrieval, trouble following conversations, or difficulty expressing ideas clearly. These subtle changes often go unnoticed, but create frustration and social withdrawal. Re-establishing normal sleep patterns restores oxygen flow to these regions and often leads to noticeable improvements in communication. Another important connection lies between sleep apnea and chronic fatigue. It's not just about being sleepy, it's about mental exhaustion. When sleep is repeatedly interrupted, the brain uses more energy to stay semi-alert through the night. That overuse drains reserves meant for the next day. People wake feeling like they've already worked for hours. This contributes to the foggy thinking, poor focus, and reduced motivation commonly reported. As breathing becomes stable, energy patterns normalize, and the mind feels refreshed instead of drained. Mood disorders and sleep apnea share overlapping biology. Inflammatory signals triggered by intermittent hypoxia affect neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. These brain chemicals control mood, motivation, and calmness. When oxygen is unstable, their levels fluctuate, increasing risk for depression and anxiety. Studies show that patients with both depression and apnea often respond poorly to medication alone, but improve rapidly once breathing is stabilized, a strong indication that oxygen rhythms influence emotional chemistry. Stress response also changes. Normally, cortisol levels rise in the morning and fall at night. In people with sleep apnea, this rhythm flattens. Cortisol remains elevated into the night, keeping the body in a mild state of tension. This disrupts deep sleep and interferes with emotional regulation the next day. After treatment, cortisol rhythms often return to normal, allowing natural sleep stages to resume and emotional balance to improve. All these neurological patterns confirm that breathing is not just physical, it's deeply connected to thought, mood, and behavior. The brain expects stability to function optimally. When it receives that consistency again, mental clarity returns. Take another breath now and feel how oxygen calmly feeds your thoughts. That rhythm supports everything, from how you feel to how you focus. It's what the nervous system needs to restore its natural strength. Hormones act as the body's internal messaging system, and sleep is when many of those messages are written and delivered. When breathing repeatedly stops through the night, that communication becomes distorted. Sleep apnea shifts the timing and quantity of several major hormones, creating effects that reach from metabolism to reproduction. One of the first hormones affected is cortisol, the main stress signal. Under normal conditions, cortisol peaks in the early morning to help you wake up, then declines gradually during the day. In people with apnea, this pattern flattens, levels remain elevated well into the night. Constant cortisol exposure raises blood pressure, drives appetite, and suppresses the immune system. When treatment restores steady breathing, nighttime cortisol finally drops, allowing the body to relax and blood pressure to normalize. Insulin follows a similar pattern. Deep sleep increases insulin sensitivity, allowing cells to take up glucose efficiently. Interrupted sleep does the opposite. Repeated oxygen dips activate the sympathetic nervous system, which releases adrenaline and glucose into the blood. The pancreas then works overtime to produce insulin, but cells become resistant. Over months or years, this can lead to type 2 diabetes. Several clinical trials show that after 3 months of effective apnea therapy, insulin sensitivity improves by 20 to 30%, even without dietary change. Thyroid hormones are also sensitive to oxygen balance. The thyroid gland regulates metabolism, heart rate, and body temperature. Hypoxia suppresses thyroid-stimulating hormone, lowering overall thyroid output. Patients may feel unusually cold, sluggish, or gain weight without changing their diet. Once oxygen remains stable at night, thyroid function often returns to normal ranges, and energy levels climb back up. Growth hormone secretion depends on slow-wave sleep, which apnea fragments. Without consistent deep stages, growth hormone release drops sharply. This reduces muscle repair, collagen production, and fat metabolism. The result is slower recovery from exercise and gradual loss of lean mass. After treatment, slow-wave sleep increases, growth hormone output rebounds, and muscle tone improves. The reproductive system relies on equally delicate timing. In men, testosterone is released mainly during REM sleep. Each interruption shortens that phase, lowering total testosterone. Symptoms include decreased energy, reduced muscle mass, and mood changes. Clinical data show that men with severe apnea have testosterone levels 10 to 15% lower than those without. When therapy restores REM sleep, testosterone rises again within months. Women experience different effects. Premenopausal women are relatively protected because estrogen supports airway muscle tone. After menopause, when estrogen and progesterone fall, apnea risk increases sharply. Some hormone replacement therapies indirectly reduce apnea severity by improving upper airway stability, though they are not a primary treatment. Researchers are studying how progesterone's natural stimulatory effect on breathing could be mimicked safely in future medications. Leptin and ghrelin, the hormones that control hunger and fullness, are disrupted too. In fragmented sleep, leptin falls and ghrelin rises, intensifying appetite, especially for carbohydrates. This drives weight gain, which then worsens apnea, creating a self-reinforcing loop. Restoring normal sleep resets both hormones and reduces late-night cravings almost immediately. Melatonin, the hormone that signals nightfall, also loses rhythm when sleep is disturbed. Frequent awakenings confuse the brain's perception of darkness and rest time, delaying melatonin release. People may have trouble falling back asleep after apnea-related awakenings. Once therapy stabilizes breathing, melatonin rhythm resynchronizes with natural light cycles, improving sleep onset and continuity. Other hormones, such as aldosterone, which controls salt and fluid balance, increase during chronic apnea, contributing to fluid retention and morning swelling. Correcting breathing lowers aldosterone and reduces this excess fluid, easing both blood pressure control and airway openness at night. Overall, the endocrine picture of sleep apnea resembles accelerated aging, elevated cortisol, lowered growth and sex hormones, and impaired insulin sensitivity. The encouraging fact is that every one of these abnormalities reverses when oxygen and sleep continuity are restored. Within weeks of consistent therapy, hormone levels trend toward normal. Within months, energy, mood, and body composition follow. These hormonal shifts explain why treated patients often feel younger. Their internal clock, disrupted by years of stress signals, finally realigns with daylight, feeding, and rest cycles. Stable breathing resets not only oxygen but also timing, which is the foundation of hormonal health. Take a slow, easy breath in and exhale. That simple movement is enough to guide the entire endocrine system back toward equilibrium, one quiet night at a time. Physical endurance depends on a precise partnership between the lungs, heart, and muscles. When that partnership is disrupted every few minutes through the night, performance declines even if total sleep hours seem normal. The most direct reason is reduced oxygen availability. Each apnea episode lowers blood oxygen saturation and forces the heart to pump harder to compensate. Over time, that constant strain weakens efficiency and slows recovery after exertion. Cardiologists measure recovery using a metric called heart rate variability, or HRV. It reflects the balance between sympathetic fight or flight and parasympathetic rest and digest control. People with untreated apnea show lower HRV, meaning the heart remains tense even at rest. After a few weeks of continuous positive airway pressure, HRV improves markedly, showing that nightly oxygen stability retrains the autonomic nervous system to relax again. During exercise, muscles rely on mitochondria to generate energy through aerobic metabolism. When apnea has been present for years, mitochondria adapt poorly to oxygen delivery changes. Muscle biopsies from affected individuals show smaller mitochondrial size and lower enzyme activity, reducing endurance. Once breathing becomes consistent, those parameters rebound. Aerobic capacity measured by VO2 max often rises by 10 to 20% within 3 months. Patients describe the difference as finally catching a full breath during activity. Apnea also interferes with the body's acid-base balance. Every time breathing stops, carbon dioxide accumulates, forming carbonic acid in the blood. This mild acidosis repeats hundreds of times each night, nudging the kidneys to excrete more bicarbonate. The next day, the buffering system is temporarily weakened, so lactic acid builds up faster during exertion. Treating apnea restores normal buffering, allowing longer workouts before fatigue. Circulation through the small vessels, capillaries that feed muscles and organs, narrows during chronic hypoxia. The inner lining, or endothelium, becomes less responsive to nitric oxide, reducing dilation. That means less blood flow exactly when the body needs it. With treatment, endothelial function improves within weeks, restoring efficient nutrient delivery and waste removal. This is why many patients notice warmer hands and feet and faster muscle recovery once therapy begins. Sleep apnea affects not only endurance but coordination. Reaction time studies show that athletes with untreated apnea respond slower to visual cues and commit more errors in precision tasks. These changes come from fragmented REM sleep, which is essential for motor skill consolidation. After stable sleep returns, reaction times shorten and fine motor accuracy improves. Clear evidence that oxygen stability sharpens the brain-muscle connection. Blood pressure recovery after exercise follows a similar pattern. In healthy individuals, pressure drops quickly back to baseline after exertion. In apnea, it stays elevated longer because the sympathetic nervous system remains overactive. Continuous therapy reestablishes normal post-exercise recovery, reducing cardiovascular load. This improvement translates into lower risk of heart attack or stroke over the long term. Another important factor is hematocrit, the proportion of red blood cells in the blood. Repeated oxygen deprivation stimulates erythropoietin release from the kidneys, increasing red cell production. While this initially seems beneficial, excessive hematocrit thickens the blood, making circulation sluggish and straining the heart. When therapy normalizes oxygen, erythropoietin levels fall, blood becomes less viscous, and cardiac workload eases. Muscle inflammation decreases as well. Before treatment, microscopic scans show increased infiltration of immune cells in skeletal muscle, reflecting constant stress from low oxygen. After stable breathing is restored, inflammatory markers such as creatine kinase decline and muscle fibers regenerate more effectively. This change underlies the renewed energy patients often feel after several weeks of consistent therapy. Hydration status can influence airway behavior too. Dehydration thickens mucus in the throat, increasing resistance. Maintaining adequate fluid intake during the day and avoiding excessive caffeine or alcohol in the evening keeps airway tissues flexible. Clinicians sometimes call this the simplest form of airway maintenance, a reminder that small daytime habits affect nighttime physiology. Finally, physical performance depends heavily on motivation. Chronic fatigue dulls the drive to move, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of inactivity. Once oxygen and sleep return to normal, dopamine signaling in the brain's reward centers rebounds, bringing back the natural desire to exercise. Many patients report that they spontaneously resume walking, cycling, or gym routines they had abandoned, not because of willpower, but because their body once again supplies the energy to do it. Taken together, these findings show that correcting sleep apnea doesn't merely prevent disease, it restores performance. Oxygen stability reactivates mitochondria, balances heart rhythm, and re-energizes muscle and mind. The same process that heals the heart also revives daily strength. Take one deep, unforced breath in and release it slowly. That flow carries everything the body needs to recover: fuel, balance, and quiet power. Every breath is a small dose of life support for the cells that make up the body. When those doses are interrupted hundreds of times a night, the result is a slow acceleration of biological aging. Scientists measure this acceleration through telomere length, mitochondrial function, and the pace of tissue repair. In people with untreated sleep apnea, telomeres shorten faster, reflecting cumulative stress. The shortening doesn't cause wrinkles or gray hair directly. It marks the exhaustion of the body's capacity to replace worn-out cells. After 6 months of effective therapy, telomere loss slows, and in some studies, partial regrowth appears. Proof that oxygen stability can literally lengthen the time horizon of each cell's life. Mitochondria reveal a similar story. Under normal oxygen conditions, they work like quiet engines, releasing small, steady amounts of energy. When oxygen fluctuates, they sputter, releasing bursts of reactive oxygen species. Those molecules damage surrounding membranes and DNA. Over years, this leads to weaker muscles, slower metabolism, and higher vulnerability to chronic disease. Once sleep becomes uninterrupted, mitochondrial enzymes recover, and energy production efficiency climbs. Patients often describe this as having my mornings back, a simple phrase that mirrors measurable biological repair. Another indicator of aging is the body's ability to manage inflammation. In healthy individuals, inflammation rises to heal injury, then fades. In apnea, low oxygen keeps that switch half on. Cytokines circulate continuously, eroding blood vessel walls and joint cartilage. This constant background fire contributes to arthritis, vascular stiffness, and cognitive decline. Stabilizing oxygen extinguishes that fire. Within months, blood tests show lower C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, signaling that the immune system is finally standing down. Brain aging follows its own path. Chronic hypoxia promotes amyloid and tau buildup, proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. Functional imaging reveals reduced blood flow to memory regions, which mimics decades of aging in just a few years of untreated apnea. When breathing normalizes, cerebral perfusion improves, and memory test scores rise. Long-term data suggests that consistent therapy may cut dementia risk by up to 30%. Cardiovascular longevity is perhaps the clearest measure. Each nightly surge in blood pressure stresses artery walls and the heart muscle. Over time, this causes thickening known as left ventricular hypertrophy. When apnea is corrected, that thickening often reverses. Large population studies show that people who use CPAP regularly live several years longer on average than those who refuse treatment, an unusually strong effect for a single medical intervention. Cellular repair extends beyond the heart and brain. Skin biopsies reveal fewer collagen crosslinks and less oxidative pigment in treated patients compared with untreated controls. Wound healing experiments demonstrate faster closure times once sleep normalizes. These small details confirm that oxygen stability reactivates growth factors that maintain tissues from the outside in. Aging also involves how quickly the body clears damaged proteins and waste. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system flushes these materials from the brain. Apnea interrupts that cleaning cycle, leaving residues that interfere with neuron function. Restoring continuous breathing allows the glymphatic network to operate for the full night, improving clarity and attention the following day. Longevity studies now treat apnea therapy as a public health intervention rather than a comfort measure. By reducing cardiovascular and metabolic strain, it lowers hospitalization rates, medication use, and early mortality. In economic terms, effective treatment adds not only years of life but quality of life, measured by days spent without limitation. Researchers estimate that each year of consistent therapy yields an average of 0.3 quality-adjusted life years, a strong return for something as simple as stable breathing. The final link between apnea and aging is cellular senescence, the process by which cells stop dividing but refuse to die, releasing inflammatory molecules. Intermittent hypoxia increases the number of senescent cells in fat tissue, liver, and blood vessels. When oxygen stability is restored, senescence markers decline. This suggests that healthy sleep may act as a natural anti-aging signal, clearing damaged cells and encouraging renewal. In essence, sleep apnea compresses the timeline of aging. Therapy stretches it back out. The difference can be seen in blood pressure, reaction time, and even facial expression. People often look more rested within weeks, not because of vanity, but because circulation, muscle tone, and hydration improve. Science calls it physiological rejuvenation. Patients simply call it feeling alive again. Take another quiet breath in and let it go. That effortless motion is the smallest, simplest anti-aging act the body performs millions of times each night when sleep is undisturbed. Preventing sleep apnea begins with identifying risk long before symptoms appear. Primary care doctors now use simple screening tools, such as the Stop Bang questionnaire, which checks for snoring, tiredness, observed pauses, blood pressure, body mass index, age, neck circumference, and gender. When 2 or more factors score positive, the likelihood of apnea rises sharply. Early referral for home monitoring can catch the disorder years before complications develop. Home testing devices have become remarkably accurate. Lightweight sensors record airflow, oxygen levels, and pulse changes overnight. Algorithms trained on thousands of lab studies can classify events within a few % of a full polysomnogram. This means diagnosis no longer depends on spending a night in a hospital bed. It can be done in a normal environment, capturing typical sleep patterns. Wearable technology continues to improve detection. Smartwatches and rings equipped with photoplethysmography detect microfluctuations in oxygen, saturation, and pulse amplitude. When linked with smartphone apps, they produce nightly summaries of breathing regularity. While not substitutes for medical testing, these devices prompt earlier medical attention by showing consistent irregularities. Artificial intelligence models are also transforming analysis. Software now identifies apnea severity directly from raw sound recordings of snoring or breathing. In one study, machine learning systems matched human sleep technologist accuracy by listening to audio data alone. This innovation could enable population-scale screening through inexpensive microphones, making early detection accessible to millions. Treatment technology keeps advancing in parallel. Continuous positive airway pressure machines are now half the size and noise level of those from a decade ago. Automatic pressure adjusting models track each breath and respond instantly to maintain airflow. Integrated humidifiers prevent dryness, while built-in data transmitters allow clinicians to fine-tune settings remotely. Compliance monitoring ensures that users receive the correct pressure and feedback without frequent clinic visits. For patients who struggle with masks, custom oral appliances remain effective. Computer-aided design and 3D printing allow precise jaw alignment, improving comfort and durability. New hybrid devices combine mandibular advancement with tongue-retaining features, giving relief to those with complex airway collapse. Surgical innovations have become less invasive. Instead of large resections, targeted radiofrequency treatments shrink redundant tissue under local anesthesia. Inspire-type hypoglossal nerve stimulators continue to evolve, with smaller batteries and wireless programming. Clinical outcomes show sustained improvement in sleep quality and oxygen stability beyond 5 years of use. Pharmacologic research seeks molecules that modulate airway muscle tone or enhance respiratory drive stability. Trials of noradrenergic and antimuscarinic combinations have shown partial success, reducing apnea events without altering sleep architecture. Though not replacements for mechanical support, these drugs may one day help patients who cannot tolerate existing devices. Lifestyle integration remains essential. Digital platforms coach users on weight control, exercise, and sleep hygiene alongside device use. Programs that combine calorie tracking, posture reminders, and adherence feedback improve outcomes by reinforcing healthy routines throughout the day. Even small behavioral nudges, like alerts to avoid alcohol late at night or to hydrate before bed, reduce event frequency. Public health strategies now view sleep apnea as part of chronic disease prevention. Large employers and transport agencies screen drivers and pilots to reduce accident risk. Insurance systems increasingly cover diagnostic and treatment equipment. recognizing that preventing heart attacks and strokes offsets the cost of therapy. Awareness campaigns encourage couples to discuss snoring openly, rather than dismiss it as harmless noise. Looking ahead, researchers envision fully automatic treatment ecosystems. A compact sensor might detect airway narrowing, trigger a miniature stimulator to stiffen muscles, and record results, all without waking the sleeper. Data would upload securely to cloud systems for physician review. As these technologies mature, sleep apnea management will shift from reactive correction to real-time prevention. At its core, though, the principle remains simple. Keep airflow steady, and the body heals itself. Each new device, algorithm, or habit serves that same goal. Stable breathing restores balance to every system: heart, brain, hormones, and metabolism. As you take one last slow breath for this segment, notice the ease with which air moves in and out. That steadiness is what all of science and technology aim to preserve: quiet, uninterrupted rhythm, the foundation of genuine rest and long life. In the last decade, sleep apnea research has expanded from small physiology studies to international networks linking neurology, cardiology, and genomics. The result is a clear picture of how and why breathing fails during sleep, and how it can be detected earlier and treated more precisely. At Harvard's Division of Sleep Medicine, investigators have mapped the sequence of oxygen changes that precede an apnea event. High-speed infrared cameras and throat pressure sensors show that collapse begins milliseconds before airflow stops. Muscles of the tongue and soft palate lose tone first, followed by inward motion of the pharyngeal walls. This timeline helps engineers design CPAP devices that respond to early signs of narrowing rather than waiting for full obstruction. Researchers at Oxford University have developed a non-contact radar system that measures chest and abdominal motion through blankets. The radar's reflected signal detects pauses in breathing with 97% accuracy compared with traditional polysomnography. Because the device requires no wires or sensors, it can be used in homes or hospital wards for continuous monitoring, opening the possibility of large-scale screening. In Japan, Kyoto University scientists are studying how micronas, tiny strands of genetic material that regulate protein production, change in people with chronic intermittent hypoxia. They have identified specific microna patterns that appear in blood long before symptoms arise. One candidate marker, MER181A, rises months before standard tests show abnormal oxygen drops. A future blood test based on such markers could reveal apnea risk as easily as cholesterol screening. At Stanford, machine learning models trained on millions of breathing recordings now classify apnea type and severity in real time. Instead of technicians scoring each event manually, algorithms detect airflow shape, heart rate oscillations, and snore frequency to label episodes automatically. This speeds diagnosis and reduces human error. The same technology is being integrated into wearable devices, where it quietly tracks the same parameters every night. Neuroimaging has revealed deeper effects on brain structure. Using functional MRI, European researchers discovered that oxygen fluctuations cause temporary reductions in hippocampal blood flow, even after a single night of induced apnea in volunteers. These changes reverse within 48 hours of restored breathing, highlighting how quickly the brain reacts and recovers when oxygen stabilizes. Another line of research investigates the link between apnea and cerebrospinal fluid circulation. The University of Toronto's Sleep Flow project uses MRI to visualize how each breath pulses fluid through the brain, During apnea, that pulsation stops, reducing waste clearance. Once therapy begins, the pulses return. The finding strengthens the idea that steady breathing supports the brain's natural cleansing system and protects against neurodegenerative disease. Cardiology centers in Germany and Australia are mapping how nightly hypoxia alters electrical signals in the heart. Electrocardiographic imaging, essentially a three-dimensional map of electrical conduction, shows transient delays during apnea events. These microarrhythmias often disappear when CPAP is used, suggesting that treatment not only prevents long-term structural disease, but also calms daily rhythm disturbances. Meanwhile, biomedical engineers are miniaturizing sensors. Flexible patches no thicker than a bandage now measure airflow, oxygen, and heart rate through skin contact alone. Some models power themselves from body heat, eliminating batteries. Trials across Europe indicate that these disposable sensors achieve the same diagnostic accuracy as full laboratory setups. Metabolic researchers are exploring breath chemistry. Portable spectrometers analyze exhaled air for nitric oxide and carbon dioxide ratios that shift during apnea. Early prototypes identify disease presence from a single minute of breathing with 90% sensitivity. Because breath sampling is non-invasive, it may soon complement or even replace overnight testing for preliminary screening. Finally, the World Sleep Society's Global Data Consortium is combining information from over 20 countries to create predictive models. By feeding demographic, genetic, and environmental inputs into unified algorithms, scientists can forecast which populations are most likely to develop moderate or severe apnea within the next decade. Governments use these projections to plan healthcare resources and preventive campaigns. Together, these discoveries mark a shift from reactive treatment to proactive detection. The science of sleep apnea now aims not only to treat pauses once they occur, but to foresee them, identify individuals at risk, and preserve uninterrupted breathing before damage begins. Take one calm breath and notice how each inhale feels effortless. That ease represents what these global innovations work toward: early knowledge, quiet nights, and simple prevention.